At my husband's company dinner, one of his coworkers laughed and said, "How does it feel to be a loser? Your husband earns, and you just sit at home." Everyone laughed, even my husband. Except me. I smiled, turned to the CEO, and said, "Tell me, how does it feel knowing this loser owns 67% of your company?" The room went dead silent. His face turned pale. Hook. First 10 seconds. How does it feel to be a loser? Marcus Blackwood's words sliced through the elegant Marriott ballroom, a taunt meant to humiliate. But it wasn't just his cruel laugh that ripped through me. It was the sight of my own husband, Richard, raising his champagne glass in amused agreement. Can you imagine? After 22 years, that was the moment I knew. I was going to burn their entire world to the ground. And you won't believe what happened next. The full story asterisk, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, though. Just hours before, I was still playing the part, the perfect corporate wife, completely unaware that by the end of the night, I'd be revealing I secretly owned 67% of their precious company. Now, before we dive into how that unfolded, if you've ever been dismissed, made to feel invisible, or underestimated despite everything you contribute, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It's free, and it helps share stories just like this one. All right, let's get back to it. The alarm clock? Richard hadn't heard it in years. 3 snoozes every single morning, while I'd already been up since 5:30 a.m., meticulously curating his life. My first stop was always the kitchen, where I performed the daily alchemy of his perfect breakfast. Egg whites, folded just so, absolutely no yolk, and whole grain toast, golden brown, never, ever burnt. And fresh orange juice, pulp-free, because he swore it messed with his digestion. 22 years of this routine, I could have done it blindfolded. "Karen, where's my Harvard tie?" Richard's booming voice echoed from upstairs at precisely 6:04 a.m. Right on schedule. He knew exactly where it was. 3rd drawer, left side, color-coded, of course. But asking me to fetch it, well, that just reinforced his narrative. I was the retriever, the finder, the one who smoothed out life's minor inconveniences. I climbed the stairs, carrying his coffee, 2 sugars, no cream, in that Harvard Business School mug his mother had bought him. I found him in his walk-in closet, surrounded by $40,000 worth of suits, looking utterly helpless. "The red one?" I asked, already reaching for it, not even waiting for an answer. "You have the Morrison presentation today." "Actually, it's the Singapore merger finalization," he corrected, taking the coffee without so much as a thank you. "But yes, the red one. Power color." He said it as if I hadn't been tracking his calendar for 2 decades, as if I hadn't typed up his talking points last night while he watched golf. I tied his Windsor knot, perfecting every loop, while he stood there, scrolling through emails on his phone, messages from people who, unlike me, actually mattered to him. "Don't wait up tonight," he said, adjusting the tie I just painstakingly perfected. "Company dinner at the Marriott. Black dress would be appropriate." Appropriate. After 22 years, I wasn't myself anymore. I was merely something that was either appropriate or inappropriate. Lunch with my mother at the country club was its own special kind of torture. She sat across from me at our usual table, the one overlooking the tennis courts, where she'd once hoped I'd be celebrating my victories, not just my husband's. "Richard must be thrilled about the promotion," she said, her tone suggesting anything but thrill. "Senior vice president, your father would have been impressed." My father would have been devastated, actually. He'd sent me to Columbia Business School. He'd celebrated when Goldman Sachs offered me that analyst position. He believed I'd conquer Wall Street, not become a suburban housewife whose greatest achievement was remembering her husband's coffee order. "You look tired, dear," Mother continued, studying my face with that surgical precision Mother's perfect over decades. "Are you taking those vitamins I recommended?" "I'm fine, Mother. You used to say that when you were struggling at Columbia, too, right before you quit." She set down her fork, her Caesar salad barely touched. "For him, I didn't quit. I made a choice." "Yes, and look where that choice led you." She gestured vaguely at my St. John's suit, my pearl earrings, my entire existence. "Playing dress-up for his colleagues while your brain rots in that big house." I desperately wanted to tell her about Greystone Capital, about the investment firm I'd built in secret using Dad's insurance money, about the 67% of Nexus Industries I'd quietly acquired through shell companies. I wanted to tell her how Richard's entire career existed because I'd orchestrated it from the shadows. But I couldn't. Not yet. The afternoon vanished in a blur of preparations for that night's dinner. Hair salon at 2, where they covered the gray Richard pretended not to notice. Manicure at 3:30, neutral pink, because anything else was trying too hard. Home by 4:45 to select the black dress he'd already chosen for me. My phone buzzed as I was applying my makeup. Victoria Lawson, my attorney, and the only person who knew my secret. Greystone quarterly reports attached. Your portfolio exceeded projections by 47%. You now control enough shares to replace the entire board if needed. I deleted the message immediately, a habit born from years of hiding my true self. Richard thought I spent my days at charity luncheons and book clubs. He had no idea I'd been slowly, methodically acquiring the very company where he worked, using the inheritance he thought went to our mortgage and his golf club membership. The afternoon vanished in a blur of preparations for that night's dinner. Hair salon at 2, where they covered the gray Richard pretended not to notice. Manicure at 3:30, neutral pink, because anything else was trying too hard. Home by 4:45 to select the black dress he'd already chosen for me. My phone buzzed as I was applying my makeup. Victoria Lawson, my attorney, and the only person who knew my secret. Greystone quarterly reports attached. Your portfolio exceeded projections by 47%. You now control enough shares to replace the entire board if needed. I deleted the message immediately, a habit born from years of hiding my true self. Richard thought I spent my days at charity luncheons and book clubs. He had no idea I'd been slowly, methodically acquiring the very company where he worked, using the inheritance he thought went to our mortgage and his golf club membership. Made. Surely, they counted for something. I found him standing near the bar, his champagne flute raised, his face lit with genuine amusement. Not the polite, uncomfortable smile of someone trying to navigate an awkward situation. Not the tight expression of a husband watching his wife be humiliated. He was laughing, really laughing. His shoulders shook with it. His eyes crinkled at the corners the way they did when he watched his favorite comedians on Netflix. He clinked glasses with another executive, both of them finding my humiliation genuinely entertaining. The room tilted. Or maybe I tilted. The chandelier light suddenly felt too bright. The laughter too loud, echoing off marble and crystal until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. The word loser bounced around the space, defining me, redefining me, erasing 22 years of existence and replacing it with a single, devastating label. I thought about the 2 miscarriages Richard never knew about. The first happened while he was in Tokyo, closing a deal. I'd bled alone in our bedroom, too afraid to call him and disrupt his meetings. The second occurred during his Singapore merger. I'd driven myself to the hospital, told the nurses my husband was traveling for business, held my own hand through the pain. I thought about the nights I'd spent alone in our king-sized bed while he entertained clients, the birthdays he'd missed, the anniversary dinners canceled for emergency board meetings. The slow disappearance of the woman I'd been at Columbia dissolved into the role of Richard's supporting cast. Marcus was still talking, his voice distant now, like hearing someone through water. Maybe we should start a reality show. Real Housewives of Failed Ambitions. More laughter. Richard's, the loudest of all. My hands had been shaking, but they stopped. My heart had been racing, but it slowed. Something inside me, something I'd buried under years of appropriate dresses and neutral nail polish, suddenly cracked open. The wine glass was still in my hand. I set it down with deliberate precision, the base meeting the table with a soft click. My wedding ring, 3 carats chosen by Richard's mother, caught the light as I released the stem. For 22 years, I'd been afraid. Afraid of disrupting Richard's career, afraid of embarrassing him, afraid of being too much, too loud, too visible. But sitting there, surrounded by people who saw me as nothing more than a failed ambition, a cautionary tale, a loser, I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. The Greystone Capital documents were in my safe at home. 67% ownership of Nexus Industries. Acquired quietly over 7 years through shell companies and private equity maneuvers. Richard's entire career, Marcus's job, James Harrison's CEO position. All of it existed at my discretion. They just didn't know it yet. But they were about to. I stood slowly, my movements deliberate and controlled, smoothing my black dress as I rose. The laughter was still echoing through the ballroom, bouncing off crystal and marble. But something in my posture made Marcus hesitate mid-chuckle. "You're absolutely right, Marcus." My voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. "Calm, dangerous. I am a loser." He grinned wider, thinking I was admitting defeat, raising his scotch in mock victory. Others leaned in, sensing fresh blood in the water. "A loser who owns 67% of your company." The words hung in the air for a heartbeat. Then two. Then three. Marcus's glass stopped halfway to his lips. Someone coughed. A fork clattered against a plate. I turned to face James Harrison directly, the CEO who'd barely acknowledged my existence for 7 years. His bourbon was frozen in midair, his face shifting from amusement to confusion. "James, how does it feel to know that the loser housewife you've been laughing at controls Nexus Industries through Greystone Capital?" The silence that followed was absolute. I could hear the soft hum of the air conditioning, the distant clatter of dishes in the kitchen 3 rooms away, the whisper of Eleanor Harrison's silk dress as she shifted in her seat. Richard's champagne flute slipped from his hand. The crystal shattered against the marble floor with a sound like breaking bones, champagne spreading in a golden puddle that caught the light. Nobody moved to clean it. Nobody moved at all. "That's not," James started, his voice cracking. He cleared his throat, tried again. "Greystone Capital is a private equity firm out of Manhattan. We've never met the principals." "No," I agreed, walking closer to his table, my heels clicking with each step. "You haven't. You've met their representative. Every quarter for the past 7 years, you've sent your reports to a post office box in White Plains. You've deposited dividend checks into accounts managed by shell companies. You've accepted board decisions delivered through lawyers who've never revealed their client's identity." I stopped directly in front of him, close enough to see the sweat beading on his upper lip. 7 years ago, Nexus was 48 hours from bankruptcy. My voice carried across the silent ballroom, reaching every corner, every year. Even the waiters had stopped moving, holding their trays like statues. Brennan Corp's hostile takeover was almost complete. Your stock had dropped 70%. 3 major clients had pulled their contracts. The board was meeting every 6 hours trying to find a miracle. James's hands were shaking now, bourbon trembling in his glass. Then Greystone Capital appeared. A bailout offer that seemed too good to be true. $40 million in immediate capital. Restructuring of all debt, new credit lines. The only cost was majority ownership. 67% to be exact. I pulled my phone from my purse, opened an encrypted file, and set it on James's table. The Greystone Capital letterhead was clearly visible, along with my signature as managing director. My money, my terms, my control. Patricia had her phone out, recording everything. 2 executives near the bar were frantically texting, probably their lawyers. Marcus still hadn't moved, hadn't blinked, his scotch suspended in space like he'd been frozen in amber. Every major decision for the past 7 years. I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. Every executive hire, every bonus package, every strategic pivot, they all required approval from Greystone. From me. I turned to look at Richard, who was standing in a puddle of champagne, his face the color of old paper. "Including your promotion to senior vice president, Richard. The board wanted to go with outside talent, but Greystone insisted on promoting internally. I insisted. I thought you deserved the chance to prove yourself." His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound came out. "The Singapore merger that made your career? Greystone provided the bridge financing. The Morrison account you're so proud of? I played golf with Morrison myself to seal that deal. You just presented the paperwork I'd already negotiated." "Karen, what? How is this?" Richard's voice was barely a whisper, his executive confidence shattered like the champagne flute at his feet. "The Greystone deal saved my career. I was promoted because of that merger. I thought it was a Wall Street firm, a consortium of investors." "It was one investor," I said. "Your wife? The loser who sits at home arranging flowers." James Harrison was fumbling for his phone now, his fingers clumsy with panic. "This has to be verified. Legal needs to call them." "Call your head counsel," I said calmly. "Ask him about the emergency board meeting Tuesday. He received the notice an hour ago." James's face went from red to white as someone answered his call. He turned away, whispering urgently, but we could all hear the response through the phone speaker. Yes, sir. Greystone Capital. They've called an emergency meeting. They have the votes to replace the entire board if they want. Marcus finally found his voice, though it came out strangled. This is impossible. You're just a housewife. You don't even work. I work, I said, turning to face him. I've been working every day for 7 years, building positions, acquiring shares through secondary markets, managing a portfolio worth $800 million. I just did it from my home office while you thought I was at book club. Eleanor Harrison spoke for the first time, her voice shrill with panic. James, what does this mean? The house in the Hamptons, the yacht? It means, I said, picking up my purse with deliberate calm, that the free ride is over. I looked around the room at the faces that had been laughing at me minutes ago. They weren't laughing now. They looked like passengers who just realized their captain had abandoned ship. Enjoy the rest of your dinner, I said, adjusting my purse strap. Monday morning, there will be a full forensic audit of executive spending. Every corporate card transaction, every expense report, every client entertainment receipt. I started walking toward the exit, my heels marking each step like a countdown. Tuesday, emergency board meeting. We'll be discussing new leadership. I paused, turned to look at Marcus over my shoulder. Wednesday, Marcus, you might want to update your resume. That trip to Vegas last month on the company jet, the one you filed as client entertainment? We have the security footage. The ballroom erupted behind me. Richard calling my name with increasing desperation. James shouting into his phone about legal options. Eleanor demanding to know if they'd have to sell the house. Marcus trying to explain about Vegas. But I didn't turn around. I didn't stop walking. 22 years of being invisible had taught me many things. But the most important was this. The best revenge isn't served cold. It's served at exactly the right temperature, at exactly the right moment, to exactly the right people. The valet brought my car, the Tesla Richard didn't know I owned. And I drove away from the Marriott, leaving my old life in pieces on the marble floor. Behind me, in that ballroom, the kingdom built on my money was already beginning to crumble. The Tesla's autopilot guided me home through empty streets while my phone blazed with notifications. 17 missed calls from Richard, 3 from James Harrison, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize that was probably Marcus. I turned the phone to silent and watched the city lights blur past, feeling something I hadn't experienced in decades. Control. The house was dark when I pulled into the garage at 11:47 p.m. No lights, except for the thin yellow line under Richard's study door. He'd beaten me home somehow, probably broke every traffic law in Connecticut to get here first. I made myself a cup of tea, not the chamomile Richard bought in bulk, but the expensive oolong I kept hidden behind the flour containers, and climbed the stairs to bed. The sound of papers rustling and keyboards clicking from the study followed me all night. At 6 a.m., I found him exactly where I knew he'd be, surrounded by a hurricane of financial documents. 3 laptops open to different shareholder databases. His usually perfect hair standing at angles that defied physics. Empty coffee cups formed a defensive perimeter around his desk. His Brooks Brothers shirt was untucked, unbuttoned, and had what looked like mustard stains from a gas station sandwich. We need to talk. His voice was raw, probably from making desperate phone calls all night. I poured myself coffee from my private stash, Blue Mountain from Jamaica, $70 a pound, and sat in the leather chair across from him. The chair where I'd sat hundreds of times while he explained why he'd dismissed another anniversary, another birthday, another life moment. Is it true? All of it. I took a long sip, savoring the rich flavor I denied myself whenever he was around. Every word. His hands shook as he pushed a document across the desk, a printout from the SEC database showing Greystone Capital's controlling stake in Nexus Industries. Why didn't you tell me, Karen? We could have been a power couple. We could have run the company together. Think of what we could have accomplished if I'd known. The laugh escaped before I could stop it, sharp and bitter as black coffee. Together, Richard? You told your golf buddies I dabble in investments like it was a cute hobby. You introduced me at last year's Christmas party as someone who used to have career ambitions before she found her true calling as a wife. He flinched but pressed on, his desperation overriding his shame. That was just talk. You know how those guys are. I had to maintain an image. An image of what? A successful man with a decorative wife? A breadwinner with a dependent? Tell me, Richard, in this fantasy where we run Nexus together, Would I still be making your breakfast every morning at 5:30? The doorbell rang at exactly 9 a.m., saving him from answering. Victoria Lawson stood on my doorstep with 3 associates, all carrying banker boxes and looking like a legal SWAT team. Good morning, Karen. Ready to change some lives? I led them to my home office. The room Richard thought contained my scrapbooking supplies. His jaw dropped as Victoria's team transformed it into a war room, covering every surface with documents, laptops, and evidence boxes. The forensic audit is complete, Victoria announced, spreading reports across my desk like tarot cards revealing corporate futures. It's worse than we thought. She pulled up security footage on her laptop. Marcus boarding the company jet with 2 women who were definitely not clients, a timestamp showing a Wednesday afternoon when he was supposedly in budget meetings. 17 trips to Vegas in the past year, all expensed as client entertainment. Total damage, $450,000. The next file showed James Harrison's brother-in-law's consulting firm. $3 million in contracts for services that were never rendered. The company didn't even have an office. It was registered to a residential address in Jersey. More documents, more corruption. 7 years of executives treating Nexus like their personal piggy bank, while I remained silent in the shadows. We can destroy them all, Victoria said, her eyes gleaming with legal bloodlust. The question is, how much damage do you want to inflict? I thought about 22 years of being introduced as Richard's better half, as if I wasn't a whole person. 22 years of having my opinions dismissed, my intelligence undermined, my existence reduced to an accessory. All of it. I want them to feel what it's like to lose everything they thought they'd found. Richard was hovering in the doorway, his face gray as old newspaper. Victoria noticed him and smiled with shark-like precision. Mr. Winters, I'd suggest you retain separate counsel. This is going to get complicated. My phone rang just as Victoria was explaining the legal intricacies of corporate takedowns. The screen showed Melissa's face, the photo from her high school graduation, where she looked so much like me at that age, before I disappeared into Richard's shadow. Mom, Dad just called me crying. Shelley crying. He says you've destroyed his career. What's happening? I stepped onto the balcony, away from Richard's desperate eyes. Your father and his colleagues humiliated me at a company dinner. They called me a loser for being a housewife. They laughed at me, Melissa. Your father laughed along. Silence stretched between California and Connecticut. So, I told them the truth, that I own the company, that I've owned it all along. Wait, what? You own Dad's company. I explained about Greystone Capital, about saving Nexus from bankruptcy, about hiding my power for 7 years while being treated like furniture. Another long pause. Then, you mean you've been running things all along, while Dad took credit for being some business genius? Yes. Holy mom, that's the most badass thing I've ever heard. It's about time you stopped letting him treat you like staff. Remember when he made you skip my recital for his client dinner? When he forgot your birthday 3 years in a row? When he told everyone at Thanksgiving that you'd given up your little career dreams to support him? I'd forgotten she'd been listening all those years, filing away every slight, every dismissal. I'm proud of you, Mom, for finally standing up. After we hung up, I found Victoria had set up a laptop showing Nexus's internal communication system. I thought you might want to see this, she said. An anonymous email had reached every Nexus employee 2 hours ago. The subject line, what your executives don't want you to know. The message contained select portions of the audit findings. Marcus's Vegas trips, James's nepotism, the executive team taking million-dollar bonuses while laying off 200 employees last Christmas. Within minutes, the company's Slack channels had exploded, years of resentment pouring out in digital form. Did you send this? I asked Victoria. She shrugged. Whistleblowers are protected by law. Could have been anyone with access to this information. My inbox was filling with messages from Nexus employees. The most surprising was from Patricia, Richard's secretary. Mrs. Winters, we always knew you were different. You remembered our names. You asked about our families. You treated us like people, not servants. Thank you for finally holding them accountable. More messages flooded in. Stories of harassment ignored by HR, qualified women passed over for promotions, executives taking credit for their subordinates' work. The revolution I'd started had found its own momentum, fueled by years of accumulated injustice. Richard stood in the doorway, watching his world crumble in real time on multiple screens. "You planned this," he whispered. "You've been planning this for years." "No, Richard. I've been surviving for years. The planning started last night, when you laughed while they called me a loser." Victoria checked her watch and smiled. "It's 8:05. Should we watch the show?" She opened her laptop to a financial news site just as the clock hit 9 a.m. Monday morning. The headline appeared immediately. "Breaking: Nexus Industries under SEC investigation following whistleblower report." Within seconds, my phone erupted with notifications. The forensic audit had been delivered simultaneously to every board member's personal email, the SEC's enforcement division, and journalists at the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, and Reuters. Victoria's team had orchestrated a surgical strike designed for maximum impact. "Marcus Blackwood is about to have a very bad morning," Victoria said, pulling up the Nexus security feed on her tablet. The timestamp read 9:17 a.m. Marcus was at his desk, probably reading the email that detailed his Vegas trips, his expense fraud, and the harassment complaints HR had buried. His face went from confusion to panic to pure terror as he realized what was happening. By 9:04 a.m., 2 security guards appeared at his office door. The entire 10th floor had gathered to watch through the glass walls as they escorted him out, making him surrender his company car keys at reception. Someone, probably one of the assistants he'd tormented, was filming on their phone. "That video will be viral within the hour," Victoria predicted. He was wrong. It took 20 minutes. Richard was pacing behind us, his phone buzzing constantly. "The office is in chaos," he said, reading his texts aloud like a war correspondent. "James is having a breakdown. 3 executives just resigned. The stock is dropping. Karen, please. You have to call this off." I turned to look at him. Really look at him for the first time that morning. His eyes were bloodshot, his shirt wrinkled, his hands trembling. This was Richard without his armor of success. "Call it off? Did you call off the laughter when they mocked me? Did you call off the 22 years of introducing me as your better half, like I was an appendage instead of a person?" "That's different." "You're right. It is different. Because this is just business, Richard. That was personal." Tuesday morning arrived, gray and drizzling. Perfect weather for a corporate funeral. I dressed carefully in a red Chanel suit I'd bought years ago but never worn. Richard had called it too aggressive for a woman. Today, aggressive was exactly what I wanted. Victoria and I arrived at Nexus headquarters at 9:45 a.m., 15 minutes before the emergency board meeting. The building felt different, quieter, tenser, like everyone was holding their breath. Mrs. Winters, the security guard at the desk, looked confused. "I don't have you on the visitor list." "I'm not a visitor," I said, handing him my Greystone Capital business card. "I own the building." The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like ascending to a throne. Victoria carried a briefcase full of evidence that would end careers, while I carried 22 years of suppressed rage refined into cold purpose. The boardroom door was solid mahogany, designed to intimidate. I pushed it open without knocking. 12 board members sat around the table like defendants awaiting sentencing. James Harrison was at the head, or what used to be the head before I arrived. His face was haggard, aged 10 years overnight. I walked directly to his chair and stood beside it, waiting. "That's the chairman's seat," he said weakly. "Yes, it is." The silence stretched until he stood, gathering his papers with shaking hands, and moved to his side chair. I sat down in what had always been my rightful place. "Greystone Capital is no longer a silent partner," I announced, my voice filling the room. "As majority shareholder, I'm exercising my right to direct oversight of this company." James tried to rally. "You can't just—" I slid a folder across the table. The thud echoed in the silence. "Embezzlement. Fraud. Breach of fiduciary duty. Your brother-in-law's fake consulting firm. The condo in Miami you bought with company funds." Should I continue? His face crumbled like old parchment. "Effective immediately, your resignation is accepted. Your golden parachute is revoked. Your stock options are void. Security is waiting outside." 30 years, he whispered. "I built this company for 30 years. No, James. You inherited a company I saved from bankruptcy and spent 7 years looting it. There's a difference." Security entered. 2 guards who'd probably made minimum wage while James collected million-dollar bonuses. The poetry of it wasn't lost on anyone as they escorted him out. "Now," I continued, Turning to the remaining board members, let's discuss new leadership. We should conduct a search, one ventured. Hire a firm, evaluate candidates. No need. Dr. Amelia Foster will serve as CEO effective immediately. The room erupted in protests. She's just an operations manager. We need someone with CEO experience. The shareholders will revolt. I am the shareholders, I reminded them. And Dr. Foster has been essentially running this company for 5 years while you gentlemen played golf. The door opened, and Amelia entered. She wore a simple navy suit but carried herself like she owned the world, which in a way, she was about to. Behind her, 2 assistants wheeled in presentation boards. "Gentlemen," she began, her voice steady and confident, "and Mrs. Winters. This restructuring plan will save Nexus $50 million annually while protecting every single non-executive job." She walked them through her vision, cutting executive perks, not workers, investing in innovation, not yacht club memberships, promoting based on merit, not connections. "This is what competence looks like," I said when she finished. "You've just forgotten, because you've been promoting based on golf handicaps instead of ability." That evening, I found Richard in our kitchen, staring at his phone like it held his death warrant. In a way, it did. "Brennan Corp offered me a position," he said without looking up. "Entry-level business development. 53 years old, and they want me to start over as an account coordinator." The same position he'd held at 25. The same position he'd mocked others for still having at 40. They know I'm toxic now. Everyone knows my own wife didn't trust me enough to tell me the truth. They think I'm either an idiot who didn't know his wife owned his company, or a fraud who knew and lied about it. The irony was perfect, served at exactly the right temperature. "How does it feel?" I asked, pouring myself a glass of wine. The good stuff, no longer hidden. To have your entire professional worth reduced to your relationship with your spouse? To be defined not by your achievements, but by who you married? He looked up at me then, and for the first time in 22 years, I saw understanding in his eyes. But understanding and redemption are different currencies, and his account was overdrawn. The doorbell rang at 7 a.m. Wednesday morning, sharp and insistent. Richard was still in bed. He'd been sleeping in the guest room since Monday, and I was sitting in my office reviewing Amelia's transition plans for Nexus. Mother stood on my doorstep, her silver hair perfectly coiffed despite the early hour, wearing the pearls father gave her for their 30th anniversary. She never visited without calling first. "Never. The whole country club knows," she said, stepping past me into the foyer. Eleanor Harrison was there yesterday, crying into her mimosa about losing their house. Margaret Blackwood has already unfriended me on Facebook, as if Marcus's Vegas trips were somehow my fault. I led her to my office, expecting the lecture about proper behavior, about not making scenes, about maintaining dignity even when wronged. That was Mother's way. Suffer beautifully, never messily. Instead, she sat down carefully in Victoria's chair and pulled a worn manila folder from her purse. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. "Do you know what these are?" I looked closer. My Columbia transcripts, showing a 3.9 GPA. The acceptance letter to Harvard Business School that I turned down. The job offer from Goldman Sachs, an analyst position, starting salary that would be impressive even today. "You kept these?" 23 years, Karen. I've carried these for 23 years, waiting for you to remember who you were before him. She spread the papers across my desk, each one a ghost of the life I'd abandoned. "You were brilliant, not just smart, brilliant. Professor Hicks called you the most promising student he'd had in a decade. Goldman fought 2 other firms for you, and you gave it all up for a man who introduced you as his better half, like you were just a fraction of a person." Tears were running down her cheeks now, something I'd only seen twice before, at Father's funeral, and when I told her I was leaving Columbia. "When your father died and left that insurance money, $2 million, I thought you'd use it to go back to school, to start your own firm, to become the woman he'd raised you to be. Instead, I used it to save Richard's company, without taking credit, without even telling him it was your money. You let him think it was venture capital. Let him present himself as the business genius who saved his startup." She grabbed my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "But I'm proud of you now, Karen, for finally fighting back. Your father would be, too." We sat there in silence, 2 generations of women who'd been taught to be supportive rather than supported, to be silent rather than seen. Thursday evening, Richard knocked on my office door, the first time he'd ever done that. He was holding a manila envelope and wearing the gray suit I'd bought him for our 20th anniversary. It hung loose on him now. He'd lost weight in the past 4 days. "Can we talk?" I gestured to the chair, but he remained standing, shifting from foot to foot like a schoolboy called to the principal's office. "I've had divorce papers drawn up," he said, placing the envelope on my desk. "I'm not contesting anything. You can have it all. The house, the cars, our entire joint portfolio." "How generous of you," I said, "to give me things I paid for." He flinched but continued, I need something, Karen. Some dignity. Maybe a consultant position at Nexus? A reference letter saying I left for personal reasons, something that doesn't make me look like a complete failure." I studied this man I'd once loved enough to sacrifice everything for. His shoulders, once broad with confidence, now curved inward. His hands, which used to gesture grandly when telling his stories, hung limp at his sides. "You want dignity?" I asked. "Where was my dignity when you laughed as Marcus called me a loser? Where was it when you told people I dabbled in investments? When you introduced me as someone who used to have career ambitions? That was different." "You're right. It was different. You had 22 years to give me dignity, Richard. Every single day, you chose not to. You chose to treat me like an employee, a secretary, a maid with a marriage certificate. Why should I show you mercy you never showed me?" He stared at the floor, his reflection visible in the polished hardwood. "Two broken men for the price of one. Because you're better than me," he said quietly. "You always were. I just never wanted to admit it." Before I could respond, we heard a car door slam outside. Melissa's voice carried through the window. She was on the phone, probably with a friend, laughing about something. "My daughter, home from Stanford unexpectedly." She burst through the front door with the energy of youth, calling out, "Mom, Dad, we need to talk." She found us in my office, took one look at our faces, and her smile faded. "You're getting divorced, aren't you?" Neither of us answered, which was answer enough. She pulled out her phone, swiping to a photo. "Look at this." It was her 5th birthday party. Richard and I, flanking her as she blew out candles on a Barbie cake I'd made from scratch. We were laughing. All 3 of us, genuinely happy in that frozen moment. This was before Dad made senior VP. Before Mom's investments. Before any of the garbage that you think matters. We were happy with less. "Melissa," Richard started. "No, Dad. You don't get to talk. You laughed while Mom was being humiliated. And Mom, you've made your point. You've destroyed Dad professionally. Marcus is apparently working at a used car dealership. James Harrison is under federal investigation. What more do you want?" She looked between us, her eyes, my eyes, blazing with frustration. "I don't want to lose my family to revenge. Can't we salvage something?" I looked at the photo again. That woman in the picture, she'd already given up Harvard to support Richard's dream. She'd already spent her father's inheritance saving his company. The happiness in that photo was built on a foundation of my sacrifices. Sacrifices nobody else even knew about. "That family never really existed, sweetheart," I said gently. "It was just me pretending everything was fine while slowly disappearing." Later, at 2 a.m., I wandered through our house like a ghost, haunting my own life. The formal dining room, where I'd hosted countless dinner parties for Richard's colleagues. The living room where I'd smiled through book club meetings while the other wives discussed their husbands' promotions. I ended up in Richard's study, his former study, I suppose. In the bottom drawer of his desk, I found it. The business plan for his first startup. My handwriting filled the margins. My financial projections. My market analysis. My strategies. The cover page read, "Innovations. A business proposal by Richard Winters." Not by Karen and Richard Winters. Not with contributions from Karen Winters. Just Richard, taking credit for my mind while I took credit for keeping his house. I poured a glass of his 30-year-old Macallan, the bottle he'd been saving for a special occasion, and raised it to the empty room. To the invisible woman who'd finally been seen. The whiskey burned, but not as much as the truth. I'd won everything and lost everything simultaneously. The victory tasted like ashes. Expensive ashes, but ashes nonetheless. My phone buzzed at 3 a.m. Victoria's name lit up the screen. "Did I wake you?" she asked, though we both knew I hadn't slept properly in days. "What is it?" "The board wants to move the emergency shareholder meeting to Friday. Same venue as last week's dinner, the Marriott Grand Ballroom." They think familiar territory will give them an advantage. I almost laughed. They wanted to return to the scene of my humiliation, not realizing they were handing me the perfect stage for their destruction. Tell them yes. And Victoria, make sure the media knows. I want cameras. Friday arrived wrapped in sunshine that felt like cosmic irony. I chose my outfit carefully, a white Armani suit I'd bought years ago but never had the courage to wear. Richard had called it too bold, which made it perfect for today. The Marriott's grand ballroom had been transformed. Gone were the round dinner tables where executives had laughed at me. Instead, 300 chairs faced a raised platform. A projection screen behind the podium, large enough that no one could miss what I was about to show them. The crowd was a mix of shareholders, employees, and media. CNN had sent a crew. The Wall Street Journal had 3 reporters present. Every financial blog worth reading had someone in attendance. I stood backstage, watching Richard enter through the main doors. He chose a seat in the very back row, probably hoping to slip out unnoticed when things got difficult. He had no idea how difficult they were about to get. At exactly 10 a.m., I walked onto that stage, my heels clicking the same rhythm that had marked my exit a week ago. The murmuring crowd fell silent. Ladies and gentlemen, I began, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. My name is Karen Winters, and through Greystone Capital, I am the majority shareholder of Nexus Industries. The presentation clicked to life behind me. A simple slide showing Greystone's 67% ownership stake. For 7 years, I've been silent while executives treated this company like their personal piggy bank. Silent while they destroyed the culture. Silent while they built a boys' club on the foundation of my investment. Marcus's Vegas trips appeared on screen. Receipts, photos, security footage. Marcus Blackwood, who last week called me a loser housewife, spent $450,000 of company money on personal entertainment. James's fraudulent contracts filled the screen. James Harrison funneled $3 million to his brother-in-law's fake consulting firm. Executive bonuses versus employee layoffs. A graph that looked like a crime scene. While laying off 200 workers last Christmas, executives gave themselves 7-figure bonuses. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Employees in the audience were recording on their phones. Good. I wanted this viral by noon. Effective immediately, I continued. Nexus Industries will be restructured from the ground up. New leadership, new culture, new values. A hand shot up in the press section. Wall Street Journal, by the lanyard. Mrs. Winters, what about your husband's role in this scandal? I found Richard in the back row. Our eyes met across 300 people. 22 years of marriage compressed into a single moment. Richard Winters has submitted his resignation, I said, never breaking eye contact with him. An investigation found he knowingly benefited from executive corruption while claiming ignorance. Richard started to stand, to leave, but I wasn't finished. Mr. Winters will receive no severance package, no references, no golden parachute. The man who built his career on his wife's money, his wife's connections, and his wife's strategies, while calling her a trophy, is no longer associated with Nexus Industries in any capacity. He stood frozen as phones swiveled toward him, everyone suddenly recognizing the former senior VP slinking toward the exit. The business community should know exactly what kind of man they're dealing with, I added. Someone who laughs when his wife is called a loser, then discovers she owns his entire world. Richard finally made it to the door, but not before 50 phones captured his retreat. The video would be viral within minutes. The executive who didn't know his wife owned his company. But today isn't about destruction, I continued, turning back to the audience. It's about construction. Nexus will donate $10 million to establish the Phoenix Foundation. The screen behind me shifted to show the foundation's mission statement. This foundation will provide scholarships and mentorship for women whose careers were derailed. Women who were told they were just housewives while holding their families together. Female executives passed over for promotion because they didn't golf with the boys. Every brilliant mind dismissed because it came in a dress. This is for you. The applause started slowly, led by the female employees, but it grew until the entire room was clapping. I noticed Eleanor Harrison in the third row, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. She'd been James's wife for 35 years, invisible at every company function, introduced as James's better half, just like I'd been Richard's. After the meeting, Eleanor approached me, her voice barely a whisper. I have a degree from Yale, she said. I was going to be a doctor, but James needed support for his career, and I disappeared. You don't have to be invisible anymore, I told her. None of us do. The afternoon brought one final piece of business. Security footage of Marcus's Vegas adventures had mysteriously appeared on every major news outlet's desk. TMZ had it online within an hour. But the real destruction came from the email trail Victoria had uncovered. Marcus planning to sabotage female colleagues, including detailed strategies to undermine Amelia Foster's projects. By 6 p.m., his LinkedIn profile was a disaster zone. Women he'd harassed over the years found courage in numbers, sharing their stories in the comments. Former colleagues detailed his bullying. One brave, in turn, posted screenshots of inappropriate messages he'd sent her. At midnight, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I knew it was Marcus. You've destroyed my life. I typed back carefully. No, Marcus. I've revealed it. There's a difference. I set down my phone and walked to the window overlooking the city. Somewhere out there, Richard was learning to be nobody special. Marcus was discovering what it meant to be truly seen. James was probably consulting with lawyers who couldn't help him. And I was finally, after 22 years, visible. The white suit hung in my closet, still pristine despite the day's battles. Tomorrow, I wear something else, be someone else. Not Richard's wife, not even Greystone Capital's owner, just Karen Winters, whoever that turned out to be. The city lights twinkled below like earthbound stars, each one representing someone's dream, someone's struggle, someone's triumph. Tonight, for the first time in decades, one of those lights was mine. 6 months passed in a blur of corporate restructuring and personal reconstruction. October arrived with its familiar chill, and I found myself standing in the transformed headquarters of Nexus Industries, barely recognizing the place where Richard had spent more time than he'd ever spent at home. Amelia met me at reception, her CEO confidence radiating from every gesture. 40% profit increase, she said without preamble, leading me through halls that hummed with a different energy. And we did it while implementing 6 months of paid family leave. The executive floor had been gutted and rebuilt. Gone were the dark wood panels and portraits of white-haired men in suits. The walls now showcased the company's actual builders, the engineer from Mumbai who revolutionized their supply chain, the single mother from Detroit who designed their best-selling product, the former refugee from Syria who transformed their customer service. James's old office. I asked. Nursing room for new mothers. We have 14 employees using it regularly. Amelia smiled. His mahogany desk makes an excellent changing table. The old executive dining room had been converted into an open cafeteria where everyone ate together. No more segregation by salary level. I watched a junior developer sitting with the CFO, both eating the same subsidized lunch, discussing something that made them both laugh. You did this, Amelia said, handing me a folder thick with letters. These are from employees. They wanted to thank you for saving their jobs, for changing the culture, for giving them hope. I opened one at random. Mrs. Winters, I've worked here for 15 years. For the first time, I feel valued. My ideas matter. My voice is heard. Thank you for burning down the old boys club so we could build something better. I just lit the match, I said. You built this. Spring brought Melissa's graduation from Stanford. I arrived early, claiming a seat in the third row, close enough to see her face when she walked across that stage. The crowd filled in around me. Proud parents, grandparents with cameras, siblings looking bored. Then I saw him. Richard stood by the entrance, scanning the crowd uncertainly. He was thinner, his suit off the rack instead of custom-tailored. His hair had gone completely gray in the past 6 months. When our eyes met, he froze. He looked like he might turn and leave, but then started walking toward me, each step careful and measured. Hello, Karen. His voice was different, quieter, uncertain. The commanding executive tone had been replaced by something almost humble. Richard. Hey. He gestured to the empty seat beside me. It's a free country. We sat in silence for a moment before he spoke again. I've been in therapy twice a week for 6 months. He stared at his hands. No wedding ring, no Rolex. I understand now what I took from you, what I stole. Not just your money or your ideas, but your identity, your dreams, 22 years of your life. The apology sounded genuine, but I felt. He looked like he might turn and leave, but then started walking toward me, each step careful and measured. "Hello, Karen." His voice was different, quieter, uncertain. The commanding executive tone had been replaced by something almost humble. "Richard." "Hey." "I." He gestured to the empty seat beside me. "It's a free country." We sat in silence for a moment before he spoke again. "I've been in therapy twice a week for 6 months." He stared at his hands. "No wedding ring, no Rolex. I understand now what I took from you, what I stole. Not just your money or your ideas, but your identity, your dreams, 22 years of your life." The apology sounded genuine, but I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no residual love. Just emptiness where feelings used to live. "I'm glad you're learning," I said, then turned my attention back to the stage. After the ceremony, Melissa found us standing awkwardly apart. "Dad's working at a startup in Palo Alto," she told me later, after Richard had shuffled away. "Junior consultant. Makes about what a recent college grad would. He lives in a studio apartment near the train station, takes public transit to work. His coworkers don't know his history, and he's terrified they'll find out." The man who'd laughed while I was called a loser now knew exactly how it felt to be one. July brought the Phoenix Foundation's first gala. The ballroom at the Ritz, not the Marriott, never again the Marriott, filled with 25 women whose lives had been transformed. Sarah Chin took the podium first, her hands steady despite the crowd. I was a surgeon at 30. By 35, I was changing diapers and being introduced as just a mom. The Phoenix Foundation gave me the money and confidence to return to medicine. Next month, I start my residency at Mount Sinai. Maria Gonzalez spoke next. "I had an idea for a medical device that could help premature babies. For 10 years, I sketched designs between soccer practices and PTA meetings. The foundation's grant let me patent it. We go to market next quarter." Story after story of resurrection. Women who'd been buried under other people's ambitions, finally digging their way back to the surface. "You gave us permission to exist again," Sarah told me afterward. "To be more than someone's wife or mother. To remember we had dreams before we had families." Their success was my real revenge. Not destroying Richard, but building something from the ashes of my own sacrificed dreams. August found me alone in my Westchester mansion at 2 a.m., unable to sleep. The house felt too big, too empty, too quiet. Richard had taken nothing in the divorce, signed everything over without argument. Melissa was starting her own journey at a tech firm in Seattle. I walked through rooms that echoed with absence. The formal dining room where we'd hosted countless dinner parties. All Richard's colleagues, never my friends. The living room where I'd smiled through book clubs with wives who now crossed the street to avoid me. The women from the country club had made their position clear. I was dangerous. A cautionary tale whispered over champagne. "Remember Richard Winters' wife? She owned everything all along. Destroyed him completely. They say Marcus Blackwood delivers pizzas now." I poured myself wine, the 2015 Chateau Margaux I'd been saving for a special occasion that never came, and stood at the window overlooking my garden. The roses needed pruning. The fountain Richard had installed for our 20th anniversary gurgled softly in the darkness. I was 62 years old, wealthy beyond imagination, powerful beyond measure, and utterly alone. The friends who'd filled this house had been Richard's friends. The social life I'd maintained had been built around his career. Without him, without the role of corporate wife, I was untethered, floating in a space I'd claimed but didn't know how to inhabit. My phone sat silent on the counter. No one called anymore except Victoria about legal matters, and Melissa to check if I was eating. The women I'd known for 2 decades now feared me. The executives who'd laughed at me now avoided me. I'd won every battle, but lost the war for human connection. Still, as dawn broke over Westchester, painting my empty mansion in shades of gold and possibility, I thought about that night at the Marriott. Marcus calling me a loser. Richard's laughter mixing with champagne bubbles and chandelier light. The moment I decided to stop being invisible. The price of visibility was isolation. The cost of revenge was loneliness. But as I raised my glass to the sunrise, toasting another day of freedom, I knew the truth. I'd do it all again. Because being feared and alone was still better than being loved and invisible. This story of corporate revenge truly had me on the edge of my seat. My favorite part, hands down, was when Karen revealed she owned 67% of the company while they were still laughing at her. That moment was just chef's kiss. What was your favorite moment in this entire wild ride? And honestly, what would you have done if you were Karen, sitting there, hearing your husband laugh? Let me know in the comments below. I'm dying to hear your thoughts. Asterisk asterisk.